And this is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel, and this is part 4 of my presentation on the theory of energy being the answer to everything paranormal. In part 3 I talked about death and how that works, a little bit about NDEs, near-death experiences, stuff like that. So now I'm getting to the point where I'm establishing that there is a difference, and I became aware of a belief that, to me, there's a difference between the brain and what I'm describing as the mind, right? It seems that the brain is part of the physical body, where the mind is either kind of separate or it straddles a fence between the physical and the spiritual. Maybe that's the case in a living human being. The mind does the thinking in an energetic form. And the brain, I think, this is very important for my theory, the brain actually translates that thought energy into the physical. So it translates it into electrical neural signals, neurochemicals, all of that. So the brain's function is in fact to translate inputs, energetic inputs, into physical form. And then the brain will do what it does best, which is pattern matching, to make what it receives understandable. Okay. So if a spirit were to contact a human being in an energetic way, the human brain does its best to make sense of what it's receiving. So it might recognize the energy signature of what it's receiving. So perhaps a contact from the other side, if you believe in those kind of things. Because the signal it's receiving receives all the kind of little flags that say what this person is, who it was, all that sort of thing. Particularly if it's somebody who was close to you that might have passed on. Or I suppose is communicating with you from another part of the world. I don't know. But of course, there's also the fact that you'll know who they are and so on, but you might not. So you'd only have a clue as to what's coming through from that energy form, and then the brain will do its best to understand that, and the best may not be an accurate representation of what's actually being received. So if you were to go to somebody, and you hear a lot of this from psychics and things like that, as saying, well, it's a range, isn't it? All the way from, I'm getting the letter R. Does anybody relate to the letter R? And I'm like, oh, geez. You're not doing our cause any good when you do stuff. Is anybody related to the colour red? Oh, seriously, come on. But I have been to, I'll get to that. It is possible then that you could perceive, say, a force of good. And because of your beliefs, you perceive a force of good, or an energy that's good that's coming in, as something like an angel, saint, God, whatever, yeah? But depending on your religion, you might see it as a particular God, a particular type of angel, or a particular type of celestial being, whatever. So it could be interpreted in different ways by the brain, but the signal coming in would be the same if somebody else got it, except that their brain would translate it in a different way. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, in my book, Becoming a Motley Mongol, that was my second book, Amazon and Kindle, I detailed how I felt during a motorcycle accident I had. Now, I was not badly injured. I was quite fundamentally injured, but not badly. What does that mean? All of me's got knocked about. At the moment, I'm doing Pilates. Boy, I find every bit where I've ripped a joint or pulled a tendon or something like this, And Pilates makes you do some interesting exercises and muscles you'd never thought of exercising before, and you go, oh my God, what's that? And you realize this hip works better than that hip, and these knees are messed up, and oh, all this kind of thing. So, but it wasn't that bad. And I don't remember, here's what's weird, I don't remember the actual traumatic incident where I was injured, broke my arm, burnt through my foot by dragging it along the road, whatever, all the cuts and bruises and things that you get when you slide along the road at 45. I was on a motorbike, hit by a car, 45 miles an hour sliding along the road, basically. But I don't consider that a near-death experience. But I do consider it to be a method by which I was kind of forced out of my body, because I remember viewing this from a different place. I could see colours and movement and stuff like this. And then when I came to my senses, there I was, sitting on the road, holding up my broken arm, looking at the hole in my shoe, work shoe, which had burnt through, and the damage and all of that. Don't need to go into detail, but it was again a forced separation where my mind came out of my physical body just for a little bit. Interesting that happens. Okay, and of course you can do that in meditation and stuff like that. Anyway, so I think I finished with that bit, so let's move on to let's move on to ghosts. Now, I have seen one ghost that I define clearly as a ghost. Let's discuss. During my teenage years, I used to see shadows a lot. So I'd walk into a room and a shadow would leave the room. I'd be sitting at a desk like I am now, and I'd see something over here, and I'd turn to look and it would go away. Lots of movements, lots of things like this and so on. Now, as a teenager, you don't want to be looking over there when you're talking to somebody. You want to be looking them in the eye. Otherwise, they're going to think you're weird, right? So you suppress things like that. And I wish I hadn't, because I may have had some kind of extrasensory perception by which I was able to see those things, but I suppressed it. Okay. So it was more convenient to block it out, avoid the stigma and so on. And it wasn't until I was in my kind of mid-30s and I'm chatting to a colleague, in the military. In my experience, you go a lot of different places. And when you're in each place, you tend to bond with somebody and you make friends and so on. You get quite close and then you move away and you just drift apart. Yeah. And this was one of those friends. So we were quite close. And I remember saying some stuff to him about this and realizing, because I would say, like when you go in a room and a dark shape comes out the room, or you're sitting there watching the telly and you see a dark shape over here coming down and everything. He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, you know what I mean. You just kind of get the perception that there's someone else there, that there's... No. Then you realize, it's me. It's just me. Well, whatever. I keep kicking the table. Got to stop doing that. So I then realized, that maybe I'd suppressed this thing, which was sad because I could have grown into something bigger than it is now. But anyway, I simply filed it away. Now, I talked about seeing a ghost. So what I'm trying to say is I maybe have some kind of sort of leaning towards that kind of openness to stuff like that. There we are. Leave it there. So I give the ghost its title because that's the only way I can explain it. It wasn't like the old skeptical tricks of light and my imagination and stuff like this, because I saw it, I experienced it. It wasn't until afterwards when I analysed it that I thought, that was a phenomenon. That was something different. Okay. So I was only growing at that time towards being more of an open-minded person who was open to these kind of things. So I needed I wasn't able to process it. I just filed it away in my mind, which I recommend is what people do. Don't discard it, just file it away somewhere and say, yeah, I don't get that right now, but I'll just keep it. Anyway, we were in a spiritual location. It was an old kind of semi-derelict, huge house, which was something like the spiritual center in Washington State, Tacoma in the United States. Spiritual center. And there was all the evidence that they used to have big spiritual meetings, paranormal society, that kind of thing. It had, I think, 20 bedrooms across the top, big meeting room, big industrial type kitchen, all that sort of thing. Chalets in the grounds. We stayed in one of them. They cleared one up for us and a friend. It was a cool place, very cool, by a lake. It was really good. Still there. There have been some replacements and so on, and I tried to get back in touch with them, to be honest, and they weren't that interested, but never mind. Okay, so I walked into that big hall, and at the other end of the hall I could see a woman in a chair, and there were, in that part of the room, is what they call a solarium, so they got glass panels in the roof so that people could sit and take the sun. And she was sat there in a chair looking at the sun. And as I came in, I kind of glanced in the direction, she said, "He's coming." And I'm like, all right. So I walked a bit closer and I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that." "He's coming." So I got a bit closer and I said, "So are you all right? Is everything okay?" "He's coming." So this went on for a little bit longer, and she just sat there looking up at the ceiling. "He's coming." And then someone else came in the room. I heard a noise kind of behind me. I turned to see who it was, turned back to her, gone. Her, the chair, the whole thing, gone. Unexplainable. Her image was clear to me, but I didn't analyze it at the time. I was just more interested in, did she need some help? What was going on? And she was, in fact, just an old woman sitting in a chair, but she was dressed in like old-fashioned clothes, sort of lacy, kind of like a woman from 100 years ago. This was in America. I can't remember if she had a bonnet on or one of those cotton things. I get the feeling she did, but I'm not sure about that. She might have had a shawl on or something. She's just sitting in a seat, looking up in the sun, whatever. And all she would say is, "He's coming." And I never really understood what that meant, but I did understand that her, the chair, the whole thing, I looked away, and when I looked back, gone. Completely gone. And because I'd seen it so clearly, and because I'd had this, it wasn't exactly an interaction, but because I'd spoken, she'd spoken, all this kind of thing, I thought, no, whatever that was, it was real. But whether it was real in this world or some other world or some crossover, I don't know. And that's why I call it a ghost. Okay. So I have no clue what she meant by saying "he's coming." Well, what's a ghost according to my theories? Well, mind-life energy with coherence. So this is the mind-life energy that leaves a body and is coherent. So it sticks together. So all the things that make up the character of that person, the personality, stays together. And could it be that there are some kind of local energies or something that maintains that mind-life energy with coherence in one place? A ghost, a haunting. Is it possible? I suppose, yeah. Because it would be everything that was part of that person in that place, trapped there somehow by earth energies or spiritual energies or even emotional energies, although I have to say emotional energies are quite different, something I've learned, quite different between when you're a spirit and when you're an organic being, because when you're organic, of course, your emotions are directly connected to hormonal centers, enzymes, stuff like this, neurotransmitters and so on. You're directly connected together. So you have more than just your emotions. Sorry, I knew that was coming. You have more than just your emotions. You also have this chemical release that goes with your emotions. Whereas when you're a spirit, you don't have those glands, those neural production of those neurotransmitters. So it's a different world. But somehow, is it possible? Yeah, it is. Of course it is. So there we are. That's a ghost, right? You know, another example might be just talking about the emotional part. If a mother has a baby, they love the baby. And when they look at the baby and they are in that loving mood, they release oxytocin. Well, when you're a spirit, you don't have any oxytocin because there's nothing there to produce it. But you still love the baby, presumably. Interesting. So the physical location could have some part of delaying the journey, whatever that is, the natural journey of an energetic being. So you get lots of reports of haunted locations, often by quite reputable, you know, believable people. And you got to think, well, again, something there, isn't there? A phenomenon that needs to be explained by a theory. Yeah. Because lots of people have reported these things, thousands of years. And you've got to say that even though there may not be any actual scientific proof, if you've got 1 million people saying, well, I saw this, then you've got to think, well, there was something there, you know. If there's 1 million people saying they did it. So there we are. Okay. Now, of course, in the area of ghosts, money, fame, power, all that sort of thing has taken its toll. You see a lot of places where there are ghost tours, ghost investigations, ghost haunts, ghost whatever. And the problem there is though all the people may be quite honest and really want to forward that process, when you get a TV show, you've got to produce some kind of results. Otherwise, no one wants to watch. And the producers and the advertisers don't want to pay you. So there's that temptation to cheat. I'm not saying they all cheat. Far from it. Probably not many of them cheat. I don't know. But there is that. And many of them have been caught cheating. Others not. Some people might say, well, the only reason the others haven't is because they haven't been investigated enough. Because they're all cheating. Now, I'm not sure that that's so. You can feel energies like this. And we'll talk about that in the next part. Boy, this is going to be a long thing. We're already heading towards the end of this one, and we're still only on part 4. Well, there's going to be a few more of these to come, which is great, isn't it? Yes, isn't it exciting? There we are. All right, let's leave it there. Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. This is part 4 of my theory of energy being the explanation for paranormal phenomena. There you go. Oh, take care till part 5.